All right. Well, Jeff, give us a little backstory on who you are and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, my name is Jeff, and I go by or work under Planet People Studio, which, as we were just talking before we started the call, that's the social handle that I go by, and that's kind of the studio name that I work under. And it started really as a side hustle. I was working at an advertising job, and did that for 5 or 6 years, working my way up the design ranks, and didn't really get a chance to do a lot of the work that I loved, which was brand and identity work.
Surprise.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. And yeah, so I just like I needed that side hustle that, just like even 2 or 3 like extra little gigs a year, even in the beginning, just to like, fuel that passion. And I did a lot of like personal passion projects in between those gaps and shared some of that stuff online. This is way before I had any sort of like, you know, considered like larger following. And eventually it just kind of, got to the point at the agency where I was just not, kind of reached the end of my rope with,
Yeah.
not loving the client work. My team was awesome, so that's what kind of kept me there for a while, but the work was just, I had no passion for it. It was a lot of the same clients for a little bit longer than I would like, and it just kind of got stale, and I was burning out a little bit. And simultaneously, towards the end, I started posting a lot more on social, and started getting a little bit more freelance work. At this point, I was already working under the name Planet People Studio, and started posting more video content and focusing on that as sort of like a content marketing avenue. And yeah, got to the point where I had enough inquiries coming in where I kind of had to make the choice, like,
Yeah.
do I value my sleep more than, because it was like
medical insurance.
yeah, like it was a lot of, just late nights every night, and getting, more projects really than I could handle while balancing the agency gig, which, is depending on the week and what's kind of going on, could be 40, 50, 60 hours, and then trying to like manage separate projects on top of that. Like, you just get tired, man.
Yeah.
Like, and there's just no time for other stuff. So I was like, you know what? The time I think is now, and decided to take that leap and see what happens. And so far so good. So
And how long ago was that?
That was back, oh my God, I think officially it was like December that I left. So it's only been, like 5 months ish.
Yeah.
So still fairly fresh, but of like full time doing Planet People. But
Yeah. Yeah. What a transition that is. And we talk to so many people that are hoping to get to that point one day where it can be the reality. And I like, what was your gut check kind of at that point? Were you pretty confident? Were you still kind of a little bit apprehensive to make the move? How'd you feel?
Yeah, a little bit of apprehension for sure. I mean, it's a scary move. I will say, like, thankfully I had it in the back of my mind that eventually I knew I wanted to do this full time. So, I was trying to like save a certain amount from my job, and, taking on like the side work freelance, like, helped, because there's very little overhead. So it was like just kind of extra cash to put away and kind of build up this foundation. And so that kind of helped, because I felt like, okay, I have, enough to sort of sustain myself for X amount of months. And then also, thankfully, like, my wife has a good job, and I could just hop on her health insurance. She works for a school, so she gets good health insurance and stuff. So that kind of like those types of things that you really start to analyze, like, does this make sense financially, and aside from all of like the passion and like, yes, I definitely want to do this and I'm so much happier doing this,
Yeah.
which is also super important. Um, but that was obviously there. So yeah, thankfully there was enough pieces in place.
Good.
But all that aside, like, yeah, I was still like, holy shit.
Yep.
I'm about to make a pretty scary jump. Like nobody else that I know has their own business. Like, so it feels very like I feel very like almost like an outsider in my friend group
I was gonna say
in
a
a
little
way. 'Cause I'm
alien
doing
over there. Like,
yeah, like I'm doing these like things like I'm not following the normal trajectory, so it just feels
yeah,
like it's weird because you have this
yeah.
timeline in your mind from a certain age, and it feels weird to kind of try to step outside of that.
Bro, I've
So
been doing it for 11 years and it still feels like a temporary gig. It's so weird how that never, it's all the things that you get as growing up, and you're right. Like, you go to school, you get your job, you work on promotions, you kind of climb whatever you can, just be a good employee. And it's so weird that I still think to this day that like I'll go back to some agency job one day before I retire. Like,
yeah,
how weird is that? Like, why is that? But I think that's a caring thing too. I think a lot of times if you do it a little bit more haphazardly, maybe not without the confidence or the backing, whatever it might be, experience, money, support, around you, yeah, that could be a pretty risky thing to do. But it sounds like you had kind of like a certain plan, you had your ducks in a row, and it was like this might be the right time to do it.
yeah, yeah, totally. Like I said, it was something that I was planning on doing. I just didn't have an exact date of like when it was going to happen, and it was kind of one of those things where I was like, I feel like I'll know when I know, and
Yeah,
and then that happens, and you're like, oh man, this might be it,
yeah,
and pulling the trigger. Yeah, I mean, but like I wouldn't change, and now that I've been doing it, even if it's been like, a short 5 months, like I have been telling people I have learned more in the past 5 months than I almost feel like I've learned in the past 5 years in a
wow,
lot of
yeah,
ways. Like there's just so much new like knowledge gain opportunity and challenges to overcome when you decide to start your own business or do freelance or whatever it is, that a lot of things that like some things I was ready for and a lot of things I wasn't,
yeah.
and tackling those things sometimes is hard but also super rewarding, and now I feel like I've really grown as a business owner, a salesman, a designer, like all of these roles that kind of mix into one when you do this.
Yeah.
So it's also been like super rewarding in that
And
sense.
yeah, you're the ringleader, right? It's like at a certain point, there's other people to handle some of those things that might come the company's way, let alone your own way, right? And then you've got to, it's a fight or flight kind of thing. What do I do to make sure I'm keeping the business running? I'm also in sales, right? I'm also in finance and all
Yep.
that stuff. But you're right. It's a crash course. It's so great to kind of like have that amount of revenue or whatever it might be to get all that experience in just a few short months.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
That's cool, dude.
And
That's cool.
yeah,
What
yeah, it's a lot of fun.
was this like when you, so obviously most people in your same situation, the work's just not fulfilling, right? We think we've all been there many, many times. And I have a lot of my students that I teach that I see them 2, 3, 4, 5 years out of school, and they get that itch a little bit too.
Yep.
Was the sustainability kind of branch that you really, no pun intended, was that something that you just weren't getting to do as well? And was that part of the desire to move into this? And since you focus a lot on this whole idea of sustainability and design,
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really critical component for me as well, and that's something that like I've known for a while that I just want to use my skill set. It just so happens to be creative, to help people and businesses that are just trying to do things a little bit better, or trying to be thoughtful, or trying to support their local communities, et cetera, et
yeah,
cetera. And because I think like I'm a believer in like that is what's gonna help us get to the point we need to be to kind of solve this, the climate crisis and other things going on in the world that aren't so great. And I think we're always trying to like be better, and I just love the idea of being able to help those people get to where they want to be, and then subsequently kind of move the needle forward for um, their respective businesses and the categories that they're in, and inspire others and their consumers. And I think that really has the potential to make uh, positive impact in a way that actually matters, right? Like on a larger scale than maybe just like small little things, which I still think are worth doing, even if they're small. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
stuff actually makes a big difference and can have culture shifts, which I think is just super super cool. And I'm happy to try to help as much as I can be a part of that movement, so to speak. So.
Yeah. Was that obviously that was intuitive and very what you wanted to go forth with? Finding clients that are in the same zone is obviously like a tough little match for that. What happened when were you already doing that when you before leaving the agency? Were you kind of tapping into that kind of work already with clients that share maybe that same desire?
Yeah, as much as I could, that's I was kind of seeking those clients out. Um, it wasn't always the case, and it was one of those things where it was like I'm just trying, like if the project sounds cool, then like I'm all about it. And it was I would always want there to be some sort of sustainability aspect, and it's not like I have these super high standards. Like I always tell people, like, you don't have to be B certified to work with me. Like
Yeah,
I'm not like a sustainability snob or anything. Like
I know.
I think there's a lot of power just in like working with local businesses, right? Like because supply chains are a little bit smaller and you're not dealing with as much CO2 and shipping things from halfway across the world to whatever. So like supporting local businesses makes a huge impact. So that tends to be a lot of the types of clients that I do work with. I mean, it's sort of a mixed bag, but they're definitely those types of clients or frequenters. Um, but yeah, and then I would say like in having this sort of specialized like niche, right?
Hmm.
Uh, I found that just talking about it, posting and sharing, the work that is within that lane attracts clients that are also in that lane. And, once they check out the website and kind of see what we're all about, and it's like, oh, all about supporting sustainability. So are we. I've gotten so many messages in like initial inquiries from clients that are like, we love how you're focused on sustainability. That's a big pillar of our mission too. And so there's kind of this instant like bonding that happens,
Yeah.
and almost already establishing some trust before we even have a conversation. And it's been one of those things that's like, people just come in and they're like, you get it, and so I think it's a lot easier for them to, because it is kind of scary as a business owner to say, okay, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars to do this work for me, and hopefully it comes out good. And a lot of these people have been burned in the past, and so there can be reservations with hiring creatives. And if it's not, like I'm not obviously working with people that have like these massive budgets that can go and afford agencies with huge teams of people. So it's a little scarier for them to outsource stuff. So
Yeah.
I think that element of trust really needs to be present. And I think seeing that, we kind of share similar values helps a lot in getting them to that place of having a trusting relationship right out of the gate, which I think
Yeah.
is really helpful.
And you feel the outreach and the stuff you've shown either website, social media, whatever it is, and your delivery in it is enough for them to feel like, oh, this guy gets it. We're in sync. At least to, like you said, to like get past that first, the starting point, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's like with anytime you decide to make a purchase, right? Like
Yeah.
You do a minimal research usually. Like some people might like deep dive, some people might, there's a scale on how much you're really looking into it, but you kind of feel it out, right? You
Yeah.
maybe read the about page or something, and you see what the materials are made out of, where it's sourced, that kind of thing. If you're, and then obviously you have to like the look of something, right? Like there's the aesthetics. So I think it's, um, for a lot of people, it's, I get messages. The standard, I would say, like kind of message from an initial inquiry is like, hey, love your designs and love, your support of sustainability, or, that mission. Would love to like chat about whatever,
That's
whatever the
great.
project they have in
Yeah.
mind. So
I don't think there's any other one area to like, unless you specialize in something like you're going to get into sports design or you're going to get into whatever it might be. But I think there's a heart with what you're doing, because it's like, I know too, like I was in my agency years, we did design, graphic design, packaging, and toy design for every kids meal toy in every fast food chain. And I'm making up for that now, is like, I love the health and wellness side. I like working with businesses that are, like you say, kind of like creating something better, a better alternative or whatever it might be. But
yeah,
I think when you say they reach out and there's a connection with the design that you might have shown, and it's in that lane that they aspire to be, what an instant way to kind of like, it's a niche, but I don't feel like it's so dangerous to be like, oh, I'm only here, guys. I'm only here. This is what I'm accepting as a potential new client, right?
yeah, yeah, I think so too. Like there's, there's, I feel like a lot of talk about niching in the industry, and there has been for a long time.
Always. Yeah.
And I've heard arguments for both sides, but I've told, like I've talked to some students recently, and they'll ask like, should we be like focusing on one specific skill, is usually like where their head is at, and they're not even necessarily going to like in a specific industry. And my response is always like, I believe yes, because like, just if I'm putting myself in the perspective of a customer, right? Like,
Hmm.
uh, if I show up to, and there's, I need to buy something. Let's say I need a pair of shoes, and there's two stores right next to each other. There's a, you know, custom shoe shop, and then there's a sporting goods store.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and let's say I'm looking, like, I really want some nice shoes, right? Like I'm a runner or something, and I want good quality shoes. Like you're gonna go into the shoe shop, right? Because you're like, well, they specialize in shoes, so I feel like I'm probably gonna get a better product out of that. And I think the same is true when it comes to design. Like, I'll tell students, like, if you advertise yourself that like, oh, I do it all, versus, but if I'm a business owner looking for a logo,
Hmm.
are you going to hire the do it all guy or the logo guy? Like probably the
Yeah.
logo guy,
Yeah.
because you want that speciality, right? And I think, I don't know, I feel like we're kind of moving into a market of like working with specialists in a lot of ways. It happens in so many other fields, like the medical field, right? Like you go, you have an initial, consultation with like your primary care doctor, and then they're like, well, something's going on with your foot. So
Yeah.
I'm going to recommend you to the foot specialist, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, we have these interactions in other areas. And I think it makes sense in my mind, like that you would try to establish that for yourself in creative as well.
Yeah. What's that creative process like when you've inked the new client, you've already had that great conversation. They're like, we loved what you did in this one or whatever. What feels different as a someone focusing in on that sustainability with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the process, of design is relatively similar to probably most people's processes. I think like in terms of specific things that like I try to do to just make like my practice a little bit, more eco-friendly.
Hmm.
Like I'm paperless, so like I draw on an iPad versus having sketchbooks. Small thing, but like it can help. And then, attached to that, something I am working on now that isn't fully operational yet, but I'm trying to get to the point where I can just run my computer and my iPad off of solar so that it's, a cleaner energy source. And these are just like small little things that I can do.
Yeah.
And back to that, like, the impact levels, like that's a relatively small impact on the grand scale of things, but I do think that it matters. So that's, anything like that I can do. But then in terms of like the design process, I'd imagine it's sort of similar to a
Yeah.
lot of other people's. Like I very much start in a place of inspiration, sourcing images depending on the project and what makes sense, and then sketching rough ideas, and then bringing those rough ideas into vector, like primarily Illustrator work.
Yeah.
I would say is like 98% of what I do. So working in Illustrator, vectorizing things, and continuing to iterate until I feel like something's ready. I would say one thing in terms of process, like for presentation to clients, that I've shifted more recently is I've moved away from showing things too early, and I've kind of adopted, like I used to show clients sketches,
Yeah.
and many times have just run into like, it's not their fault either, because it's not their job to be able to visualize things like we the designers can, but they're looking at a sketch, and you can tell it's really hard for them to picture what is this going to look like in the end. And like I said, totally makes sense, but so it kind of would create like some nervousness, or like they want to see more iterations, adds time on, and then it kind of like muddies the initial setup. So I've kind of moved away from that and said like, okay, it makes more sense, I think, to just do the sketches and then move into vector and kind of show them like what should feel almost like a finished product.
Yeah.
And I'm showing them things in color with mock-ups, and then I'll still put like a slide in the beginning of the sketches to kind of explain the evolution of how the design got to the final outcome that they see a few slides later, so that progression makes sense and they can understand the thought process. And yeah, I found that it makes so much more sense for clients to see it in that form, and they have the visual context, especially if you're tossing in some mock-ups, like relevant mock-ups for whatever their industry is. And then it's like, oh yeah, like I can see that, like it's right there. It looks
Yeah.
great. And I found it actually cuts down a lot on revision rounds too. So that's been something that's been really great, that I recently made a shift.
It's so smart too, because it's kind of like I did the same thing for years, and you would just, it's like you wanted to have this big like ta-da and like show it, and it would be crickets sometimes. And you're like, it's funny, it went both ways for me. It was, not only was that the wrong way to do it, but I was showing a very unfinished, unthoughtful, maybe logo, to be honest with you. Like I'd be the first to admit it, right? And then turning it into that whole process and being able to kind of set the stage and storytell before the reveal is like the most powerful thing I think designers, particularly independent small businesses, can really do. Because I'm sure you've seen this too with maybe a lot of new clients in the last few months, but there's a lot of people getting into business for the first time since COVID, since these last few years, maybe probably because of a layoff or whatever. And they've never gone through this process before, right?
Yeah.
And they have, how do you hone in their expectations? But again, your talk about like the specialist of the physician, we say that all the time. It's like we don't question them when they're giving us their experienced knowledge when it comes to what they're prescribing or what they're recommending. And I think it's good for us to kind of do the same thing in a lot of ways, because it's like that, isn't that, I'm sure do you feel 10 times more confident presenting that way?
100%. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's like what you just said. It's showing the expertise and showing like the knowledge base that we have as designers, to say like, this is what I believe is the best solution based off the brief and the conversations that we've had leading up to this point. and here's how I got here, so that they can say,
Yeah.
yes, I agree with what you just said, and oh, I see exactly how you took the steps to get here. This all makes sense, and that's really, I think, what, it kind of comes to. It's like, it's not just about designing something cool, right? Because like, you could make something cool, but removed of context, does it meet their needs, right? And so I think
Yeah.
there's a lot, and this is a thing that I've learned a lot too, like, since now doing this full time. This is one of those things that I was saying at the beginning. I've gained a whole bunch of knowledge and trying out slightly different strategies, and just being able to sell them in on the idea by showing them how you got there and explaining your thought process. I found it just makes so much more sense to people. That's why I always do in-person calls to show work. I'll never send something over email and just like give them a deck and type up a
Yeah.
little explanation. And I think that's a thing you see a lot of times, where people, especially like younger, like new students, they'll ask like, oh, if I just set myself up on like Fiverr or Dribble or Upwork, whatever it is, like, do I need to interact with these people, or am I just like sending
They're
things
so
back and
scared
forth?
to. They're so
And I'm
scared to.
like, and I actually think that that's kind of one of the things that has helped me maintain a healthy pipeline as well, is I'm like constantly trying to set up calls with people, even just to chat about stuff, before we're even like, if I'm reaching out to somebody versus them reaching out to me, I'm like,
Yeah.
let's not even talk about work. We have similar missions. I'm into what you guys are doing. Like, would love to just chat, like talk shop, basically. And I think there's still a huge value in a very digital world now, right? But the human interaction is so important. And that's also, I think, like an element that I try to kind of weave into some of the work that comes out of the studio, is this, like, especially in the face of AI apparently taking over. It's like, there's people have always bought handcrafted things, right? No matter how technologically advanced products have become, like, there's always been a value on something that was made from somebody's hands. So I think
Yeah.
it all kind of connects with this human interaction. I think that's super valuable. So I always try to tell students, especially, like, be on calls with people, go get coffees, walk into their storefront and talk to somebody, like, that's so important, I think.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's that human touch. You nailed it by even just having people in the name of your title, because it's like, in your brand, because it's, again, like, I've been, as much as I'm diving in and understanding AI, and even like partially teaching it in my class now, like, I feel like they're being asked this when they graduate, so we got to have something in there. But I'm
Hmm.
always putting it like human plus AI. Like, it's that idea to always have that first. And everyone I talk to, regardless of the kind of like opinion on it, it's the overall kind of agreement is that, aren't we the ones that get to determine how far it goes in a certain way? Yes, the power can get there, and I get it. But if we could up our game in the things that specifically you just said, the outreach, the personal connection, the call, the meeting when it's not even about work, right? You keeping that up, AI doesn't stand a chance, because it's kind of like, in a way, can't compete with that. So I'm always adding those things to my kind of world that it can't even touch, you know,
Yeah.
or at least staying true to it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, I mean, the conversation, I think, is ever developing on, like, what AI's role is going to be and how it's going to evolve, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as a small business owner, it is a super useful tool for a lot of different things. Like, because our time is limited, right? And especially for like admin stuff, like, it's really
Hmm.
helpful to toss a client feedback email into ChatGPT or something, and kind of just get a quick. It'll spit out like, oh, these are the key points, right? And you can kind of save time on things like that, writing emails. Maybe like, I'm not really a copywriter. I feel like I've picked up some little things from
Hmm.
working with copywriters over the years, but sometimes, I'll use AI to help just kind of generate some good ideas for words or phrases to kind of toss onto like a badge design or something, or even just to like mock something up on like a billboard for a client and, put it into like that further, context rather than it just saying lorem ipsum or like headline
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
It's like, then it's even more, oh man, that's my ad. Like, can I run? I literally had
Yeah.
people be like, can I steal that? Like that line, and it's like those types of things are
Oh
super
yeah.
helpful because, we're only one person. So any time saving tool is definitely worth looking into.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, even for myself, like integrating it into my design process, it's still very much in the early stages.
Yeah.
And there's always new tools coming out and trying to figure out how to use them. I still think is super important though. Like I definitely don't think you should ignore it by any means, but I also don't think, you're gonna get weeded out if you don't like fully adopt and completely work it into like every part of your work stream either. So I think, yeah, I don't like I try to appease people, especially students again, who are like
Hmm.
super worried about what their futures look like, I think right now, for many reasons, AI being one of them. I try to remind them that like you said, you are the people on the other end inputting the content for it to spit out, and ultimately it's your eye, it's your choice on like what elements to use or what changes to make and all that. So it still comes from you.
Yeah.
There might just be little time saving things that it can kind of provide.
I
So
agree. Yeah. It's so fun to use it in the background for stuff like that. I've even used it to help me like name concepts just because I feel the more personal it gets to the DNA of the creative brief and what you and the client have already established, the more little touch points in that presentation that connect to them, as we were
mhm.
saying, like even earlier, makes such a huge difference, man. Like they have this sense of ownership, and then they start calling the concept by the names that you give it, and
Yep.
it's like everything's gotten a life to it now. Again, like I'm looking for any way to add that storytelling to it because I'm seeing the value in there. Like again, like decent copywriter can write a good tagline, but you give me a paragraph to write and everything, it's gonna look. I need some help, so
Yeah.
I'll be first to admit it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we make the pretty pictures, not the
I
words
know,
that go in them
I know,
necessarily.
yeah. What since you've been started now, any like takeaway projects or highlights that you've seen that like were successful in this world of you trying to bridge the sustainability and everything? What's really stood out for you in some of your projects?
Yeah. So worked with it's funny because like you said earlier, it's kind of a niche, but there's a lot of different industries that it can kind of I mean, it realistically can touch every industry, right? So um I've worked with a couple of like carbon capital companies, which it's they work with companies to kind of analyze their CO2 usage and kind of help them figure out, best ways to move forward and kind of be a partner to them to help mitigate some of that CO2 usage. So and there's a whole bunch of science behind it that I don't necessarily understand in in its full capacity, but stuff like that I think is really cool, and that's like sort of a macro business level example where uh, you know those types of companies are super important because they're going to help all the other medium to large businesses figure out ways to be more green. But then on like the micro or like smaller business realm, I've worked with a lot of and currently have like a handful of projects kind of moving towards completion or like just have completed. So not quite at the point of sharing yet, but
Yeah.
um, a lot of clothing companies and sort of consumer merchandise companies that are really taking a look at the supply chain and trying to keep things hyper local because again the more you source from farther away, those things have to be shipped, packaged, and that all takes time and resources. So keeping things super local, hyper local even, makes a huge difference. Sourcing better materials. So a lot of people using, upcycled cotton from, clothes that they've kind of repurposed
Hmm.
and rewoven the fibers into a shirt or a hat or whatever it is. And then also like plastic free, like there's a company that makes completely plastic free hats, which is really cool because, being a hat guy myself, it's like these little things that you think about, like that, that plastic's never going away. And so if, we can get to a place where all hats have no plastic, then you at least know that, as those things start to reach the end of their life, or just like the customer, gets rid of them or whatever, there's hopefully a system in place that can take that and then repurpose it back into more products, like some of these companies are already establishing. But also, that, at least with there being no plastic, like if it's made out of cotton or more like organic materials, it at least isn't going to break down and just leave behind these elements that don't break down. So like
Yeah.
plastic, and like plastic's usually in the bill of the hat, but they make them out of bamboo and cork, which is pretty cool. So, and it always amazes me, like someone will reach out to me and they'll kind of explain like what their product is all about and how they're thinking
Yeah.
about it. And it's like, man, like that is so cool because there's so many new solutions coming out. And it's really, I feel like amid a time where a lot of people are sort of really negative and down on like the state of the climate and the sustainability movement, it's like there's also a ton of people and companies providing a lot of really awesome solutions, that have the potential to really make a big difference. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of on, more on that side of like looking at those and, again, like I said at the beginning, doing what I can to help prop those people up so that they can continue to do what they do and help influence more people. Um, so yeah, but I mean, I love the range. It keeps things fresh too, and so, like I said, it's always cool to learn and meet new people that are similar minded, but in completely different categories, right?
Yeah.
Like science based versus consumer, apparel products. So it's fun to see the differences.
Yeah. And they're all striving for the same thing in some way. There's a common thread, between
Absolutely, yeah.
them. I also think too, you could become this great knowledge hub to a potential new client that needs let's say, a uniqueness, and you might already know who that is because of your world being kind of so enriched by the same theme, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's like been a huge focus for me because, I'm really striving towards, and I tell clients that like I want to be your creative partner, and there's layers to what that means. Like
Good.
I don't
Good.
want to just be someone that you come to, you have a project, you pay me, I send you files, and then wish you luck. Like I've contacted and worked with and also just gotten to know like various vendors for apparel and stuff like I just said. So, a lot of companies, they maybe want some merch, or if they're looking to source stuff just to like sell on their website or bring to like a trade show or whatever it is, like,
Yeah.
I have a list of people that I can hook them up with, and I know these people by name, and I'm like, I'll set up the meeting, and then it's there's other, like in terms of like shipping, packaging. I've talked to a few different companies that are kind of in that space for more sustainable like mailers and printers, because inks and the paper being used and the different effects being used, like have various impacts. And so yeah, as much as I can, I have been trying to be, like you said, that knowledge base, and
Hmm.
try to be, you know, try to help them with the next steps as much as possible, whether it's setting up a meeting with that contact that I might have, or what I've found a lot of clients kind of like is that, oh, this is one less thing that I have to do research on, and you already kind of know a lot about this. We've already
Yeah.
established that I trust you, and we just made some cool stuff together. So why don't you oversee this, and we'll re-engage on, sort of a separate scope involving that stuff, and I'll just kind of trust you to be like take point on it. And yeah, again, like it's great for them because they don't have to now spend time researching places, reaching out, trying to set up calls and figure out like what they want to do. So there's like a lot of value that I try to provide clients outside of just making that, like designing them cool things.
Yeah. One less thing to worry about. That, like, if that doesn't sum up what we should be doing for our partners, I do the same thing. I hate using the term like client or vendor or something like that. It's like
Yeah.
making sure you're giving them the value above and beyond, like particularly too, like you can only almost be positioned to be more of a consultant in this field too, and that can be a great way to onboard the next person, like when they're not quite ready to take on the full project, let's say, or build the brand identity. They don't feel quite there yet. You could kind of test the waters with, and they could test the waters with you on more of a consultant basis to kind of, share your knowledge.
Yeah, and that's been something that I've offered up to clients in the past, for sure, because again, it's like there's outside of just, having some vendor contacts and stuff, there's a whole host of knowledge that, that comes with trying to make the right decision. And if you're a business, let's say that's, I don't know, maybe you've been local, but now you're moving into like shipping a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
of your products, right? Now you need all the shipping packaging. What's the best solution? There's a lot of greenwashing out there. There's a lot of different products, and it's like, how do I make the right choice? And there's things to consider, right? It's like, oh, home compostable might be great, but then how many people actually have compost bins, and how often do those get composted? Not that much, really. And then there's a whole bunch of compostable things that are commercially compostable only, and there's only a handful of those facilities in the entire country. So it's like that's not really a great option. They're probably just going to end up in the trash anyway. There's things like bioplastics, like, oh, well, it's made out of organic materials, so that's better, right? But it's like, no, it's just plastic.
Yeah.
It's just made from organic materials. Now the end product is still plastic. It doesn't degrade any differently than regular plastic. So like there's all these things, and it's hard. Even I can't keep up with all of the
Oh, I
stuff.
can imagine. I was going to say the average consumer, but even like the experienced person, I'm fooled
Right.
all the time. Yeah.
And then it's one of those things where it's like, as a business owner, the customers will call you out on these things. So if you're gonna say, hey, we're super sustainable, you better be ready to like back it up. And it's, it can be daunting if you're a business owner and you want to make sure, you have the best intentions, but if you get called out on something and, you kind of made a bad choice on one front or another, that could have negative impacts. So, yeah, just I always tell clients like I will give you my honest opinions, any knowledge that I have. Like I'm a resource for you,
Good.
and as much as I can help you, that's always my goal. So
Cool. Before we end this, one of the things I wanted to chat with you about, I know what you've built matches to the person out there that you're trying to attract, right? The right client, and you put the stuff you put out there. But I want to talk to you about putting yourself out there and really, having fun with Instagram. And that's where I discovered you. And I thought, shit, I love the way you approach stuff because it is calm, it is confident, it has these like, it feels like you put something together, but it also feels very casual. You know what I mean? And I'm assuming you're just trying to be as authentic as you can, but so many folks are afraid to make that leap and like maybe be the face, in front of the camera, behind the camera, whatever it might be. But what led you to get to that comfort level? And what tips do you have for anybody that wants to do something very similar, even just start?
yeah. Well, first off, I guess I would say, for anybody thinking about doing it or like wondering if it's worthwhile, my answer would be absolutely 100% yes. Like, so being a multi-year designer at an advertising agency, I worked on a lot of clients' social media content. And so I got to kind of understand a lot about how social works and what kind of content performs well, and got to see, you know, metrics and talking with the analytics team and all this stuff. And so like I got a really good understanding of how content works and what content viewers are looking for. And short form video is just absolutely king right now. Like there's just no way around it. There's also it's been a thing in the back of my mind that I know content marketing is a good idea for any business owner. Back to the days of me watching The Future with Chris Do in my college dorm room, like trying to soak up as much knowledge as possible. And they talked a lot about that and still do. And
Mhm.
so it was a thing that I always knew I needed to do. And I just started off like, I think I started with very talking head to camera stuff a long time ago, and would just kind of give some tips or like my thoughts on something. And so I started in that place. Uh, in terms of like being comfortable putting my face up there for the first time, I really wasn't. But it was, again, it was like this decision of, I know that this is a valuable thing to do for my business, is where it all started. So I just need to do it. Like I just need to post
Yeah.
it. I just need to do it. And so after doing the first one, the second one, the third one, you're like, okay. And then it's really reassuring whenever, you hear your close group of friends, family, and they're like, oh, I saw your video. Like, that was pretty cool. And like, I loved what you were saying about
Now I
what,
know what you do.
yeah. And it's like, because I feel like a lot of it is kind of worrying about what people close to you are going to think. Like, oh, they're going to think I'm weird, or like, I don't know. Like, there's
Am I
like, can be a
trying too
stigma.
hard? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and so the more I did it, the more I got used to it, obviously, just like with anything else. And then um, what started to happen is the more videos I made sharing work and trying to weave in little like tips and tricks within that context, I got people DMing me saying that like, that they got a ton of value out of it, and like they were, so thankful that like I kind of showed them this way of doing this thing, and it's going to help them so much in their workflow. And just like lots of really just positive reinforcement, and seeing people like actually getting value from it, and it like helping other designers primarily. And so, it kind of turned into now where I'm like, that's a really cool thing to be able to share the experiences that I have, and have people say like, this helped me a lot. Like that is so cool. And I'm not someone with the most years of experience by any means, and so I'm always just trying to be honest about like my my experiences and what I've personally learned, and things that I personally like use in my workflow. Um, and yeah, it's grown into, what now is, I think I'm, 91,000 followers or something like that. And, it's cool. Like I primarily love it now because I get to help other creatives, especially young creatives, I think like learn a lot. Um, but then also, it does still serve as a source of inquiries from people, because they still see the work, and they're now seeing like my process on how I make things.
Yeah.
And so it instantly is like, oh, cool. I understand how he made this thing. I like the way it looked. I could see that, being beneficial for my business. So I'll reach out. So it plays both sides, which is great. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's still a thing. Like social's weird. It's a thing I'm still like testing out various things with, but um, absolutely putting my face up there, I think, was the shift where like people started to resonate with, the content I was sharing and started to take notice.
Yeah, it's like there's some you want to trust somebody. So if you're not seeing them,
Yeah.
it's a little bit harder, and I think you're right. You take a baby step, try it out once or twice, and next thing you know, you can't believe you even had any kind of apprehensive like kind of idea of putting it out there, right? It's like it's almost natural in a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what we were saying about, human interaction. I think it's like
Yeah.
people like to learn from other people, and there's that connection there. And like you just said, if there isn't a face behind the teaching or the sharing, it's a little harder. Like I think that's why, we're very much now have moved into an age where like influencers and content creators are almost and sometimes a lot more effective at selling products than advertisements,
Hmm.
because these people like people just feel more trustworthy for something, whatever that is, and whatever community or creator you kind of follow and choose to resonate with. Like if they say like, "Oh, I use this thing," you're probably going to be like, "Oh, I might check that out too because I trust this
Yeah.
person." And
Yeah.
it's kind of the same for our creative work, I think. So, um, yeah, it's a pretty dynamic thing, but I mean, absolutely, again, would recommend putting your face up there and just being yourself. Like, be authentic. You don't have to try to like do stuff just because it's popular or like you see
Yeah.
a certain thing made. Like, even like my format, it's like you see a lot of other creators like doing it, and I didn't coin it or anything like that. It's just like a way that I enjoy making stuff, but I see people who enjoy like talking into the mic and kind of explaining their work, and that's really cool too. I haven't done that yet, but like
Yeah.
stuff like that's really fun. So just like find what you enjoy doing, and I think it can have a huge value for your business, 100%.
Awesome. Awesome, dude. Well, bro, it was great chatting with you. Glad we finally
Yeah,
got to put this on the calendar.
yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. So much
Yeah,
fun.
dude.
I've never done anything like this before. It's my first podcast or just even like chat, official like talk and shop chat with somebody in general. So this was
Yeah,
a lot
keep doing them, man, because they're again like it's even just they don't have to be taped or recorded or broadcast anywhere. Again, like you said earlier, just having great conversations with other designers and reach out to folks if there's someone you like what they're doing. Just say like, "This is great. I want to know more." Like to me, that's the way everybody learns, particularly our younger generation that are like kind of just like getting into this industry right now. It's never been more kind of like scared. I get it, so it's like anything more we can give them to kind of feel confident, get that experience in there, but also remember like it's you, tell a story, do it the way you want to. And I think that authenticity totally shines through.
100%. Yeah.
Awesome.
There's somebody out there for everyone. Like
There you
there's
go. And I like to say too, there's plenty of work because
yeah, oh my
I'm
God.
seeing people get hired that maybe shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You
I
know
mean
what I mean?
it's yeah, there's something like I think it's something like 4 billion businesses are started I don't know. It's like maybe that's too high, but there's a crazy amount of businesses started every single year in the US alone. So
Yeah.
there's absolutely plenty of people that need designers' help for sure.
Yeah, it's a graphic design world out there, man. Every city I go to, I'm like, there's great branding everywhere now. Like it's so awesome to see. It tells you there's a lot of us creeping into these neighborhoods, and I love seeing that more than ever, man. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
And that
We're
it helps because those, competitors and stuff are like, oh, they have cool design. I need cool design to keep up.
yes,
And so it creates an atmosphere of promoting design work, which I think is awesome. So
that's a great point. That's a great
yeah.
point. Where can they find you, Jeff? Go ahead and throw out anything you want.
Yeah, so primarily on Instagram at Planet People Studio. I got links up there for the website and everything else. Post on Dribble as well. Also at Planet People Studio. Um, no Twitter, no no Facebook, no
No
TikTok.
TikTok. Forget about
Yeah,
it.
which is
keep it slim, man. Keep it
yeah,
slim.
I don't know. My wife tells me I'm crazy for not doing TikTok, but yeah,
I
that's all
know.
I can handle right now on top of doing the client work as well. So
I hear you, man. All right, dude. Well, thanks so much for joining, bro.
yeah, thank you so much, Nick.